Hi, I'm John with InspectorPrime. In this tutorial, I'll show you how to manage your employees' weekly schedules. This is a very simple, yet very granular system that allows you to not only schedule the expected hours your employees will work, but also track the actual hours they work. We'll see in this tutorial how you can derive some key performance indicators from those metrics. To begin this tutorial, let's just visit the overview page within the weekly employees schedules interface. You'll see here it's pretty straightforward. This system simply allows you to track each employee's planned work hours for the week. It also allows you to log in their actual hours worked. And we'll see some key metrics within the weekly schedules dashboard, and we'll see how we can manage, edit, add, and duplicate weekly schedules for your employees within the weekly schedules listing. Let's dive into the weekly employee schedules dashboard. We can see several key metrics here, as well as some helpful pie charts, bar chart, a listing of the actual weekly schedules for your company, the calendar view, and a timeline view. Let's begin at the top. The first metrics here you're going to see are simple status metrics. If you open up a record for a weekly employee schedule, you'll see that we track the status as approved, pending actual hours, in progress, scheduled, and pending scheduled hours. Every weekly schedule record will begin as pending scheduled hours. This simply means you need to put in the hours you expect your employee or yourself to work. Once that's completed, you move on and mark it as scheduled. And finally, once that week is in progress, you simply update the status to in progress. When the week is completed, you update it to pending actual hours, where you conduct a quick review to ensure that you record the actual hours you worked. And finally, once that's approved, you simply mark the record as approved. We can see the link here is to Betty Brandt. This is our fictional virtual assistant that we hire for 20 hours a week. Let's get rid of that record link right now. And adding an employee to a record is simple as clicking into it, finding their record, and selecting them. The start date and end date informs this automated field here to create your work week. And the duration is also automatically applied. We also have some automated fields that tell you whether or not your hours status is on target or below target, whether your overtime status is normal hours or overtime hours, how many overtime hours based on a standard 40-hour week that employee has worked for that schedule, the total scheduled hours based on this section right here where you input the expected hours that the employee will work that week, the actual hours worked, which is based on the hours the employee actually worked that week, and an hours variance field, which is automatically calculated as a simple difference between the total scheduled hours and the actual hours worked. With that brief overview of what a weekly schedule record looks like, let's continue looking at the metrics. Again, you can see the status of your schedules. For our fictional company, we've got 3 in progress for this week. And we have 3 from last week pending their actual hours. These metrics show your total scheduled hours across all schedules, your average scheduled hours, your total actual hours worked, your average actual hours worked, your total overtime hours worked, and your average overtime hours worked. It's important to note this is for all 90 records shown right here. Again, we have powerful filters. If we want to simply see the month metrics, you can easily filter by start date is within this calendar month, and you see the weekly schedules for that month that are in progress, and you see the average scheduled hours worked. Nothing, of course, displays down here because these schedules have not been approved and they're not complete yet. You can also filter by employee. And you can see past schedules that are approved, pending schedules, and in progress schedules, as well as what Sam Wilson has worked as far as total scheduled hours, average scheduled hours, and etc. So when you're looking at these metrics, be sure to use the appropriate filters you want to see. Maybe you want to see the month, maybe you want to see the year, so on and so forth. Very simple to work with. There is no running reports. Data is live. You don't have to push any other buttons, but you do need to filter based on what you want to look at this point in time. This is a simple status pie chart. And again, you can click on these and they're interactive. Our sample data, our hours status pie chart isn't too interesting as we've hit all of our on-target schedules. They've all worked normal hours and they haven't worked any overtime hours. Willing to bet your company will likely be a little bit different. Now, this hours bar chart right here is a simple comparison chart. It shows you for each employee what their scheduled hours were and what their actual hours worked were. So if there's some discrepancies there, you can identify some patterns and perhaps make some changes in your company's operations. But we see again for the sample data, whatever hours they've been scheduled to work, they've actually worked. And of course, we have a basic listing sorted by status and start date, showing all the employees' weekly schedules. And you can open the records here and modify them as you see fit. Weekly schedules calendar is again fairly straightforward as well. You can always see previous months. You can plan ahead as far as you like. And of course, you can open up the records themselves and again, make changes you like. Timeline is similar. Simply view a timeline of your historical weekly employee schedules and you get a feel for what each employee has done. And finally, we have a Kanban view of weekly employee schedules that simply shows the status and whether or not you've got anything pending for action. We see here we've got 3 pending for action. We'll tackle those in a minute or so when we discuss the weekly schedules listing. Now let's get started with the weekly schedules listing. When you first enter the weekly schedules listing interface page, you'll be shown the calendar view, which shows you the latest 6 weeks. You can, of course, backtrack to previous weeks. And for our sample company, we've got the current week in progress right here. And I'll show you later on how to create and duplicate and modify future schedules for your employees. Before that, I want to show you the other visualizations you can use to view your data. You can view a list view. can edit inline, you can open the record, and you can make the changes to your weekly schedule within this record detail here. Again, doing so is quite easy. It auto saves, so make your changes you need to make, and they'll be saved automatically with the revision history in this section here when you click into it. Again, adding an employee or deselecting an employee is quite simple as well. Our start date and our end date is tied to our duration field, which is automatically calculated. Obviously, for weekly schedules, the standard will be a 7-day work week. These hours status, overtime hours, total scheduled hours, actual hours worked, hours variance, work week, the hours and fields you see in this column here, and the hours and fields you see in this column here are all automatically calculated for you based on your inputs here and in the scheduled hours profile section and in the actual hours worked profiles section. To schedule your hours, you simply select the appropriate time and date. For Betty Brandt, our VA, she works 5 days a week, 4 hours a day, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. And we can see here, those are her total scheduled hours. The hours variance is -20 because she has not input, or her supervisor has not input, her actual hours worked. That is done either on the go, day after day, or as you see fit at the end of the week. It's your choice. So you'll go in and you'll fill out the days and the times for every weekday's start and end. And of course, if they don't work that day, simply leave it empty. When it comes time to approve this record, we'll go in and we'll again select the actual hours and dates and times that they worked. As simple as that. And these columns and fields will automatically update. And you'll see that the hours variance will be negated. Now if you've got scheduled overtime, it'll track your overtime hours here. It's based on a formula of a standard 40-hour week. And this overtime status indicator will also show whether or not it's in an overtime status as well. We can see something like that with a past approved schedule for Betty. We see that the total scheduled hours worked matches the actual hours worked. And so the hours variance is 0. And she's got no overtime hours. And her hours status is on target because these two match up. If there was a variance, it would show under hours or it would show overtime. So that's the list view. We've also got a timeline view. You can change how you want to see these, whether it's quarter, month, two-week period, week, day, year, 5-year, and so on. There's also a grid view. The grid view is useful to do some calculations and look at some KPIs. You can have it calculate your yearly total scheduled hours, and you can see those hours across these fields. You can have it grouped by quarter and see how many hours you worked in a specific quarter. And you can group by month as well and see how many hours you've worked in a month. You can see the distribution across the weekdays as well. Kanban view is useful for supervisors that need to quickly approve and click into a record, make the changes, and mark it as a certain status. Simply drag and drop. And the gallery view will simply show you a gallery of those records. And it's best to filter. Nothing's pending, we do have some in-progress schedules, so you can quickly take a look at those. And again, you can filter by the start and end date to get a more granular view. Let's go to the timeline. Let's say we wanted to plan ahead. We've only planned out until the end of this week. We simply click into the record and duplicate it. Then, because we've got duplicate records here, we drag and drop. Now, we've automatically created a record for Betty Brand for the next week. We'll do the same for Dick Grayson. Click in, hit the menu item, duplicate, drag and drop. And finally for Sam Wilson, and drag and drop. Now we'll click into each record and make the changes we need to. This is, of course, pending the scheduled hours. So we'll make those changes real quick, and you'll see that color-coded update reflected on the timeline to the left. Now, dragging and dropping and duplicating it duplicated the standard hours that these employees work, and it changed the start date and end date. So we don't have to change that. What we will need to change are the scheduled Mondays, Tuesdays, and so on. We'll need to change those days, 8/11 to 8/17. It's a simple, just clicking in here and modifying these to reflect appropriate dates. When we get into automations, we'll be able to show you how you can create automations that takes care of some of this manual entry work. We've preloaded a lot of automations for you, but the fact is we can't predict how many employees a company is going to have and create those automations that match up with their companies. We'll leave these blank because, again, we don't work the weekends. Now we're all set. This schedule is no longer pending scheduled hours. It's scheduled. We'll do the same for Dick. I won't show you how I click in and change the dates, but let's assume that all that has been done. Simply mark them as scheduled. And you can do that right here as well when you click this open. And you can modify what shows up here when you click on a record. If you want nothing shown, you can deselect all fields and have only this sidebar shown. If you like having more information here as you click it, you can do the same. And of course you can navigate to the different records easily with these arrows. So that is the weekly employee schedules system. And again, it's not tied into your time slot management or your job and service management system. This is simply a way to, again, at a granular level, track the scheduled hours you and your employees work and the actual hours you and your employees works. It opens up some KPIs for your company so you can evaluate exactly the types of capacity and utilization rates you're receiving from your employees. And you can break it down by year, quarter, month, week, and weekday.